ओम श्री परमात्मने नमः। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। श्रीमद् भगवत गीता साधका संजीवनी 14th chapter, the three modes of material nature, verses 19 to 27, means of God realization and marks of the man who has transcended the three modes of nature. Having discussed the three modes of nature from the 5th to the 18th verses, now the Lord in the next two verses discusses the means of rising above the three gunas, modes, as well as its reward. Verse 19. नान्यं गुणे भयः कर्तारं यदा द्रष्टनुपश्यति गुणे भयश्च परं वेति मद्भावं सोऽधिगच्छति. When the seer beholds no agent other than the modes and knows the self beyond the modes, he attains to my being. Comment. There is no agent other than the gunas, modes. That is, the modes alone are responsible for all actions and modifications. The self, the illuminator of the modes, is an observer who is in no way contaminated by the modes and who has no connection with the modes and actions because they ever undergo modifications, while there is no modification at all in the self. The thoughtful striver who attains knowledge of the self attains to the Lord's being, that is, becomes identical with him. It means that the striver, that is self, who assumed his affinity with the gunas, modes, by error, that assumption is wiped out and he realizes his identity with the Lord, which is natural. Verse 20. Gunan etan atitya त्रिन्देहि देहा समुद्भवान् जन्म मृत्यु जरा दुःखेर विमुक्तो अमृतम अश्नुते. When the embodied soul, wise man, rises above these three gunas, modes, out of which the body is evolved, he is freed from birth, death, old age, and pain, and attains to immortality. Comment. Though a thoughtful person, soul, has no connection with the body, yet the people think him dwelling in the body. The body is evolved out of these modes. A man, soul, assumes his affinity with these modes. Attachment to these modes is the cause of his birth in good and evil wombs. A thoughtful person rises above the three modes, that is, he renounces his assumed affinity with them because he clearly perceives that he, self, is distinct from the gunas, having no connection at all because the self undergoes no change, while the gunas always undergo modifications. The self has no connection even with Prakriti, matter, nature, from which these modes evolve. Then how can he, self, have any affinity with gunas? When a striver rises above these three modes, he becomes free from the sufferings of birth, death, and old age, because attachment to these modes is the cause of his birth, etc. These modes appear and disappear, and they also undergo modifications in the forms Sattvika, Rajasa, and Tamsa, while he, the self, ever remains detached, and so he undergoes no modifications in the form of birth, death, and old age. It is because of his attachment to the gunas that he suffers the pangs of birth, death, and old age. One who realizes the self totally detached from these modes attains to the immortality which is natural. A man's soul, by his identification with the body, regards its death as his death. He, being a portion of the Lord, is immortal, but being attached to pleasures and prosperity and having a desire to maintain the decaying and dying body, he does not realize his immortality. A thoughtful person applying his discrimination comes to know that he is different from the body and thus realizes his immortality. A man, the self, by his identification with the body, is reborn and assumes the body's old age and pain, etc. in him. The body is evolved out of the three modes. Transcendental great person, being free from the three modes, becomes free from all the pains which he bore because of his assumed identification with the body. Therefore, every person should realize his transcendental self before death. When he transcends the three gunas modes, he is freed from all the sufferings of old age and death, and he realizes his immortality and is not reborn. Having heard from Lord Krishna the truth that the embodied soul transcending the three gunas attains to immortality, Arjuna becomes curious to know the characteristics and conduct of such a person who has transcended the three gunas and also the means of rising above them, and so he puts the question. Verse 21. Arjuna uvacha Kerlinge strin gunan etan अतीतो भवति प्रभो किमाचारः कथं चेतान् स्त्रीन् गुणान् अतिवर्तते. Arjuna said, what are the marks of him who has transcended the three gunas, modes? O Lord, what is his conduct? How does he transcend the three modes? In response to Arjuna's first question, the Lord explains the marks of the person who has transcended the three gunas, modes, in the next two verses. Verse 22. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Prakasham cha pravrittim cha moham eva cha pandava na dveshti sampravritani na nivritani kankashti. The blessed Lord said, O Pandava, he does not hate illumination, activity and delusion when they are present, nor does he long for them when they are absent. Comment. Purity of the senses and mind is called prakasha or illumination. It means that illumination is the power which enables the senses to perceive the five objects of senses, the mind to think and the intellect to judge. The Lord explained two marks of the modes of sattva, goodness, illumination, purity, and knowledge. Out of the two, here only illumination has been mentioned because in the mode of goodness, illumination occupies a predominant place because unless there is illumination, purity in the senses, mind and intellect, discrimination is not aroused. Illumination arouses knowledge, so knowledge should be included within illumination. So long a person is attached to the modes of nature, the propensities such as greed, activity, undertaking of actions, unrest and craving of the modes of passion spring up. But when a man rises above the three gunas, modes, the propensities of the mode of passion don't spring up, but there is activity free from attachment and desire. Thus the activity of the transcendental person is flawless. The mode of passion has two forms, attachment and actions. Out of the two, attachment is the root of all sufferings. A transcendental person is free from attachment, but he performs actions without having any desire for the fruit of actions. Delusion can be of two kinds. First, absence of discrimination between the real and the unreal, or between what ought to be done and what ought not to be done. Second, error in practical life. As far as the first sort of delusion is concerned, a transcendental soul is totally free from it. But as far as an error in practical life is concerned, even a transcendental person may commit it. He may have an optical illusion and may take a rope as a snake and a shell as a piece of silver by error. Illumination is the effect of sattva, activity of rajas, and delusion of tamas. A transcendental person does not hate illumination, activity and delusion when they are present, nor does he long for them when they are absent. It means that he does not hate them by thinking why they have evolved and that they should disappear, nor does he desire that they should continue or they should evolve again. A person who has transcended The three modes of nature remains indifferent to them. An important fact. One thing is cropping up of thoughts, while another is to be engaged in thoughts. There is a world of difference between the two. The former is cosmic, while the latter is personal. We are not responsible for what happens in the world, but we are held responsible for what we do. Moreover, by having attachment and aversion for the worldly activities, we assume our affinity with them. That is, we become the doer, and so we have to get the fruit. If we don't assume our affinity with them, we will not be responsible for them and we will not have to reap their fruit because they are performed by the body, a fragment of the world. In the same way, as we are not held responsible for numberless actions which are performed in the world through cosmic power, so a striver should have neither attachment nor aversion to the good and evil propensities evolved from the three modes of nature. That is, he should not assume his affinity with them. These propensities appear in the mind of even the transcendental souls. They appear and again disappear, but he has neither attachment nor aversion for them. He does not even perceive them as such because he holds nothing else besides the Lord in the entire universe. A striver should think seriously that dispositions appear and disappear, but he, self, remains the same. The changeable can't see the changeable, only the changeless can see the changeable. This is the rule. It proves that the self is the observer while the dispositions are to be observed. So he is different from them. So he should not assume his affinity with them. He should neither be pleased nor displeased with the appearance and disappearance of the kaleidoscopic, mutable, and perishable dispositions. He should ever remain fixed in his real self, which is non changing, immutable, and imperishable. Verse 23. उदासीना वदासीनो गुणैर्यो न विचाल्यते गुणावर्तन्त इत्येव यो अवतिष्ठति नेङ्गते. He is seated like one unconcerned, is not moved by the modes of nature, and he stands apart without wavering, knowing that it is only the modes that act. Comment. When two persons fight, he who sides with the one is called partial. He who is just to both is a mediator, while Udasina is he who sees the two but has an attitude of indifference towards either of the two. From the viewpoint of the realized soul who has risen above the three gunas, there is no existence of the world except God. He himself has merged in God. So to whom should he be indifferent? Therefore, no question of his being indifferent arises. But to the common people, he seems indifferent to the world. The propensities of the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance appear in his mind, but he is not moved by them. He remains unconcerned as he remains when those propensities come to the minds of others because he perceives that nothing has its existence besides the Lord. He remains fixed in the self by understanding that it is the modes which are acting on the modes. The person who rises above the three modes of nature does not perform any action himself because in the imperishable pure self there is no activity. In the next two verses, the Lord answers Arjuna's second question. What is his conduct? Verses 24 and 25. Sama dukha sukha swastha samaloष्टाश्मा कांचनः तुल्या प्रिया प्रियो धीरस्तुल्या निन्दात्म संस्थितिः मानापमान्योस्तुल्यस्तुल्यो मित्रारिपक्षः सर्वारंभा परित्यागी गुणातीतः स उच्यते. He regards pain and pleasure alike, dwell in his own self, views a clod of earth, a stone, and gold alike, remains the same amidst the pleasant and the unpleasant, is firm and views blame and praise alike. He is the same in honor and dishonor, and the same to friends and foes. He has abandoned all undertakings. Such a man is said to have risen above the modes of nature. Comment. A person having transcended the modes of nature discriminates the real from the unreal and remains firm, fixed in the self. He remains the same in desirable and undesirable circumstances, namely pleasure and pain, which appear as the fruit of his past actions. They can't make him happy and sad. In the self, there is neither pleasure nor pain. The self is their eliminator. He remains established in the self. He has neither attachment nor aversion to a clod of earth, a piece of stone, and a piece of gold. He makes their proper use but remains alike in their gain and loss. Not to know the distinction between a clod of earth, a stone, and gold is not even mindedness. Having known their distinction, not to have attraction and aversion to them is even mindedness. The knowledge of their distinction is not a fault, but to be affected by them is an evil. He remains alike in success and failure, which he gets here as the fruit of his actions. Praise and blame mainly relate to name. The man beyond gunas has no connection at all with the name. He is neither pleased when he is praised, nor displeased when he is blamed. He has neither attachment to those who praise him, nor aversion to those who blame him. This is common trait that a man likes praise but dislikes blame. He who rises above gunas knows the two, but he treats both of them alike. He remains established in the self where praise and blame have no access. Both praise and blame are activities done by others. To be pleased or displeased with them is a mistake. Whatever one's nature is and whatever his conviction is, he will speak accordingly. It is not just if a striver expects of others that they should not censure him. It is rather unjust if he compels other persons to praise him and not to blame him. He should be pleased when someone blames him, because in that case his sins are wiped out and he is purified. When someone praises him, then his virtues are destroyed. So he should not be pleased with the praise because it involves danger. A person regards honor and dishonor of the body or the name as his own when he identifies himself with the body. But the person who has transcended the modes, having snapped his connection with the body, is neither pleased with honor nor displeased with dishonor, because he remains established in the self which is free from all alterations and modifications. So he feels neither happy when he is honored nor sad when he is dishonored. He remains alike. To have the knowledge of honor and dishonor is not an evil, but to be happy and unhappy is an evil. Both are modifications of nature. He entertains no feelings of friendship or enmity towards anyone, but people find their own sentiment of friendship or enmity reflected in him. So, even by knowing the fact that some other persons regard him as their friend or enemy, he maintains an attitude of impartiality towards them. If he has to divide a thing between the two, one who regards him as a friend and the other who regards him as an enemy, he gives a bit less to the former than to the latter, because he is generous to the latter, even in judgment. This is also equanimity or even mindedness. He abandons all new undertakings for pleasures and prosperity. He performs actions according to the circumstances, being free from the feelings of egoism, attachment, having no desire for their fruit, and abandons them without having any desire for praise and honor, etc. Such a person is said to have risen above the three gunas, modes of nature. In fact, the person who has transcended the three modes of nature cannot have any marks. Marks vest in the modes of Prakriti or in Prakriti. How can he who has marks transcend gunas? Arjuna has inquired marks of such a person. The Lord has described those marks. In fact, these are the marks of his so-called inner sense and body. These marks are only hints of such a person. They can't describe him. The modes are the evolutes of nature, while the body, senses, mind, and intellect are the evolutes of modes. So the senses, mind, and intellect can't even fully describe the modes which are their cause. How can they describe Prakriti, the cause of modes? Then, how is it possible for them to describe the one who has transcended the modes? Now, the Lord in the next verse answers Arjuna's third question. How does he transcend the three modes? Verse 26. Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatitetan brahma bhvaya kalpate. He who serves me with exclusive devotion rises above the three modes and becomes eligible for attaining Brahma. Comment. In the scriptures, it is mentioned that he who worships the Lord with exclusive devotion has not to adopt any other means, even in the discipline of knowledge, for becoming eligible to attain Brahma. He automatically becomes eligible to attain Brahma. But a devotee is not satisfied with this sort of attainment. He wants to please the Lord. He regards the Lord's pleasure as his own pleasure. It means that one who surrenders himself to the Lord becomes eligible for attaining Brahma automatically. The Absolute, who is attained by the disciplines of knowledge and action, etc., is also attained by the discipline of devotion. The means to attain him may be different, but what is attained is the same Absolute. How does a devotee who worships the Lord become eligible for attaining Brahma? The Lord answers the question in the next verse. Verse 27. Brahmano hi pratishthaham amritasya vyasya cha shashvatasya cha dharmasya sukhasya ya kantikasya ya cha. For I am the abode of Brahma, the immortal and the imperishable, of eternal dharma, law or virtue, and of absolute bliss. Comment. As the burning fire which is seen and the fire present in a piece of wood which is not seen are one and the same, similarly, the Lord is the same as endowed with form and also without form. As the nose smells the same food while the tongue tastes it, similarly, the same Lord is Brahma for a devotee following the discipline of knowledge and Lord Krishna for a devotee of devotion. In fact, Lord Krishna and Brahma are one and the same. The Lord is the immortal and the imperishable. It means that the immortal and the imperishable are not two different entities, but one and the same. Lord Krishna is the abode of eternal dharma, and eternal dharma is the abode of the Lord. It means that the Lord and eternal dharma are one and the same. Lord Krishna is the abode of absolute bliss, and absolute bliss is the abode of the Lord. The same absolute bliss has been called eternal bliss, supreme bliss, and infinite bliss. Here, Brahma, the immortal, the imperishable, is Lord Krishna, and Lord Krishna is Brahma, the immortal, the imperishable. In this verse, emphasis has been laid on the identity of Lord Krishna with Brahma, the imperishable and the eternal dharma, etc. All of them, in spite of being called by different names, are one and the same. Thus, a devotee who worships Lord Krishna attains Brahma. Om Tat Sat. All glories to Sri Partha Sarthi, Lord Shri Krishna. All glories to Bhagavad Vani, Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Sri Hari Arpanamastu.